Why is he still alive? My daughter-in-law whispered to my son, thinking no one could hear her. They were talking about me. So I left, and 2 days later I returned to them, not alone, but with the police, and their lives were ruined. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The dishes hit the granite counter harder than necessary. Ruby stood at the kitchen sink, her shoulders rigid beneath her designer blouse, scrubbing plates with movements that screamed frustration. I tried focusing on my newspaper, but the sound of running water mixed with her aggressive clattering made reading impossible. Norman, her voice cut through the evening air without warmth. I looked up from the sports section, my reading glasses sliding down my nose. What is it, Ruby? She didn't turn around. Steam rose from the hot water as she attacked a perfectly clean dinner plate. We need to talk about space. Space? I folded the newspaper carefully, setting it beside my coffee cup. The evening light streaming through the open windows caught the stainless steel appliances, making everything look sharp-edged. What kind of space? Living space, privacy space. Ruby finally turned, water dripping from her hands onto the kitchen floor. The kids are growing, Norman. Emma needs her own room. Jake can't share forever. I kept my voice level. 4 bedrooms should be plenty for 2 children. Should be. She grabbed the dish towel with unnecessary force. But it's not just about bedrooms, is it? It's about having our own place, our own rules, our own life. The back door opened with a soft squeak. Philip appeared, still wearing his logistics company polo shirt, immediately sensing the tension like a weather change. He stopped just inside the doorway, keys dangling from his finger. Hey, Dad. Ruby? His voice carried that familiar uncertainty, the tone he'd used since childhood when adults were arguing. Ruby's laugh held no humor. Perfect timing, Philip. Your father and I were discussing independence. I watched my son's face close down. 38 years old, and still trying to disappear when conflict arose. Independence? The kind where adults make decisions about their own homes, Ruby continued, her green eyes fixed on me. Without asking permission to move furniture or hang pictures. Heat rose in my chest, but I controlled it. 43 years as an automotive engineer had taught me patience. This is my house, Ruby, my name on the deed, my rules under this roof. Exactly the problem, she crossed her arms. We're not teenagers, Norman. We're a family trying to build something of our own. Philip shifted his weight, keys jingling. Maybe we could talk about this later. No. Ruby's voice sharpened. We've talked later for 2 years. I'm tired of tiptoeing around your father's feelings while our children grow up in someone else's house. I stood slowly, my arthritic knees protesting. The newspaper rustled as I moved. Someone else's house? Who paid the down payment on your first house, Ruby? Who covered Philip's gambling debts when you lost everything? Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Philip's face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks to his collar. That's not fair, Ruby whispered. Fair? I laughed, surprising myself with the bitterness. Fair would have been letting you figure it out yourselves. Fair would have been saying no when Philip came crawling back with foreclosure papers. Ruby turned back to the sink, her movements sharp and jerky. The sound of running water filled the kitchen again, but now it seemed louder, more aggressive. Philip cleared his throat. Dad, we appreciate everything. Appreciate? The word tasted wrong. If you appreciated anything, your wife wouldn't be standing in my kitchen demanding independence while living rent-free. Ruby spun around, dish soap bubbles still clinging to her hands. Rent-free? You think we're freeloaders? I think you've forgotten what gratitude looks like. The tension crackled between us like electricity before a storm. Philip stood frozen by the door, caught between his father and his wife, saying nothing because silence was safer than choosing sides. Ruby dried her hands with deliberate precision, each movement controlled. You know what, Norman? Maybe you're right. Maybe we should remember what independence feels like. She walked past Philip without looking at him, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. A moment later, the front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Philip and I stood in the sudden quiet, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator and distant voices from the children's rooms upstairs. I settled into my leather armchair in the living room, carrying my coffee cup with both hands. The familiar creak of worn cushions welcomed me, but comfort felt elusive. Through the large window, the backyard stretched toward the neighbor's fence, bathed in the golden light of early evening. The photo album sat on the side table where Margaret had always kept it. I reached for it, my fingers tracing the embossed cover. Inside, memories waited like evidence in a case file. May 2020. The bank photo jumped out first. Philip, Ruby, and I standing outside First National, all smiles and handshakes. The loan officer had questioned the gift amount. $70,000 seemed excessive for a down payment assistance. I'd explained calmly. Helping my son achieve home ownership was my priority. Philip had gripped my shoulder that day, his voice thick with emotion. "This changes everything, Dad. Emma will have her own yard. Jake can learn to ride bikes on sidewalks instead of apartment hallways." Ruby had been different then, grateful. She'd hugged me outside the bank, saying how this investment in their future meant everything. The house was perfect, brick ranch style in Ferndale, good schools, safe neighborhood. $280,000 seemed reasonable for their fresh start. I turned the page, finding the housewarming photo. Ruby had baked cookies, hung curtains she'd designed herself. Philip looked proud, finally the provider he'd always wanted to become. The children played in their new bedrooms, voices echoing through rooms that belonged to them. Margaret would have loved seeing that photo. She'd always said Philip needed confidence more than criticism. "Build him up, Norman," she'd whispered during his troubled teenage years. "He'll find his way." But Margaret hadn't lived to see what happened next. The foreclosure notice photo came from November 2023. Not an actual photo. I'd taken it with my phone when Philip brought the papers to my house. His hands had shaken as he'd spread the documents across this same kitchen table. "I messed up, Dad. The casino. I thought I could win it back. The mortgage payments, the credit cards, everything spiraled. $43,000 in gambling debts. The house gone in 3 months. Ruby's design business couldn't cover the losses, not with client payments often delayed for weeks. I'd made the decision without hesitation. Pack your things. You'll stay here until you get back on your feet." That was 18 months ago. 18 months of my retirement, becoming a boarding house for adults who should have learned responsibility decades earlier. Ruby's initial shame had lasted maybe 6 weeks. Then came small complaints about my grocery choices, suggestions about redecorating the guest rooms, hints about needing more autonomy. The shame had transformed into entitlement, so gradually I'd barely noticed the change. Margaret's advice echoed in my memory. "There's a difference between helping and enabling, Norman. Help builds people up. Enabling tears them down." I closed the photo album, my arthritic fingers stiff from gripping the pages too tightly. Tomorrow I'd leave for Florida. 8 days at the Marriott in Clearwater, my annual escape from Michigan's unpredictable spring weather. Maybe the distance would give everyone perspective. Maybe Ruby would remember what appreciation felt like. Or Philip would find some backbone. Maybe I'd return to a family that remembered what gratitude looked like. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8:30, its deep tones filling the quiet house. The Honda Accord's engine ticked as it cooled in the evening heat. I'd parked on the street instead of the driveway, wanting to surprise everyone with my early return from Florida. 8 days of sunshine and golf had cleared my head, but I'd missed the grandchildren more than expected. My vacation luggage felt heavier than usual as I walked through the backyard gate. The Florida tan on my arms looked strange against Michigan's pale spring light. Birds sang in the oak trees Margaret had planted 15 years ago, their branches now thick enough to shade most of the yard. The kitchen window stood wide open, catching the warm May breeze. Smart of Ruby to air out the house on such a beautiful afternoon. Voices drifted through the screen. I paused near the window, planning to call out my arrival, when Ruby's words stopped me cold. "Philip, we need to seriously talk. Why is he still alive?" My luggage hit the grass with a soft thud. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Philip's voice came uncertain, confused. "Ruby, what do you mean?" "I mean, why is your father still controlling our lives? We're in our 30s, Philip. 30s. The world shifted around me. My knees felt weak, and I pressed against the brick wall for support. They were talking about me, about my death, about wanting me gone. "But Dad's been good to us," Philip said, his tone defensive but not strong enough. Never strong enough. Ruby's laugh carried no warmth. "Good to us? He's suffocating us. Every decision runs through Norman first. Where we eat dinner, what temperature the house should be, which friends the kids can have over. I can't even buy new curtains without his approval." I stayed perfectly still, my back against the warm brick. The polo shirt I'd worn for travel stuck to my skin despite the evening breeze. He means well, Philip offered weakly. Meaning well doesn't fix anything. Ruby's voice grew sharper. Your children barely know what it feels like to live in their own family's home. Emma asked me yesterday why Grandpa decides everything and Daddy doesn't. The words hit like punches. Emma had asked that? My 8-year-old granddaughter saw me as a controlling dictator? What do you want me to do? Philip's question came out as a plea. I want you to act like a man instead of a scared little boy. I want you to tell your father we're moving out. I want you to stop letting him bankroll our entire existence. Through the kitchen window, I could see Philip's shadow pacing near the refrigerator, his movements jerky, agitated. Ruby, you know we can't afford our own place right now. The gambling debts, the credit damage. Then fix it, her voice cracked with frustration. Get a second job, sell something, do whatever it takes, but stop hiding behind your father's money like it's some kind of shield. My heart hammered against my ribs. These people I'd sacrificed for, worried about, protected, they saw me as the enemy, the obstacle between them and happiness. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier if he just... Ruby's voice dropped, but I caught the words. If he just wasn't around anymore. Natural causes, obviously. He's 68, Norman. His heart, his blood pressure. The garage door opener hummed in the distance. Someone was coming home. The children probably returning from after-school activities. I pressed deeper into the shadow cast by the house, my vacation clothes suddenly feeling foreign against my skin. The conversation inside shifted, voices becoming careful, measured. But I'd heard enough, more than enough. Ruby wanted me dead, not murdered. She wasn't that kind of person, but gone, removed from their lives so they could finally be free. The irony burned in my chest. They couldn't survive without my support, but they resented every dollar, every rule, every reminder of their dependence. Well, perhaps it was time they learned what true independence actually cost. Ruby's voice carried through the screen with perfect clarity. He controls every step we take, Philip. We can't even rearrange the living room furniture without his permission. I pressed my back harder against the warm brick wall, my vacation polo shirt sticking to my skin. The Florida tan on my arms looked absurd in this moment of betrayal. Maybe you're right. Philip's words hit me like a physical blow. Sometimes I feel like a teenager living in my own father's house. My hands clenched into fists. 40 years of working 60-hour weeks to provide for this family, and my son felt like a teenager? Ruby's laugh held no warmth. Exactly. We're adults, Philip. Adults with children who need to see their parents making decisions. Through the kitchen window, I could see Ruby's silhouette pacing near the refrigerator. Her gestures were sharp, animated with frustration. Philip sat at the table where I'd eaten breakfast that morning, his head in his hands. We need a plan, Ruby continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We can't live like this forever. What do you suggest? Philip's question came out weak, defeated. A cardinal landed on Margaret's bird feeder, its red feathers brilliant against the evening light. Such a peaceful scene for such devastating words. First, we stop asking permission for everything. We're going to redecorate Emma's room next weekend, and we're not consulting Norman first. Ruby, that's his house. It's our home, too. Her voice cracked with emotion. Our children's home. They shouldn't have to tiptoe around their grandfather's rules every single day. The dishwasher hummed to life inside the kitchen, normal sounds of evening routine while my world crumbled outside. I shifted my weight, trying to find a position that didn't make my arthritic knees scream. The vacation luggage sat forgotten on the grass beside me, bright Florida tags mocking this moment. What else? Philip asked, and I could hear the resignation in his voice. We start looking for our own place, seriously this time. No more excuses about credit scores or down payments. With what money, Ruby? You know we can't afford. Then we find a way. You get a second job, I take on more clients. Whatever it takes to get us out from under his thumb. My throat felt tight. Under my thumb? I'd given them everything. Everything. He's not going to like us becoming independent, Philip said quietly. Ruby's response chilled me to the bone. Then maybe it's time he learned that we don't need his approval anymore. The sound of small feet on stairs drifted from inside the house. Emma or Jake coming down for evening snacks. Their voices would change everything, force the adult conversation to end. We'll talk more later, Ruby whispered quickly. "After the kids are in bed." I heard chairs scraping against the kitchen floor, the refrigerator opening, cheerful greetings to whichever grandchild had appeared. My legs felt unsteady as I backed away from the window, moving carefully to avoid making noise. The conversation was over, but the damage was complete. They wanted me gone. Not dead exactly, but removed from their lives. They saw my support as control, my care as interference, my home as a prison. The evening air felt cold against my face, despite the warm May temperature. I backed away from the window as their voices faded into family chatter, my legs unsteady beneath me. The vacation luggage felt impossibly heavy as I lifted it from the grass, my hands trembling with more than physical strain. The walk to my Honda Accord felt like a funeral march. Each step took me further from the family I'd sacrificed everything for, toward a future I couldn't yet imagine. The car keys jingled in my pocket, a familiar sound in an unfamiliar moment. Sitting in the driver's seat, engine off, I stared at my house through the windshield. The kitchen window glowed warmly, probably Ruby helping the children with homework, while Philip read his logistics reports. Normal evening routine in a home I suddenly felt unwelcome in. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The overheard conversation played in my mind like a broken record. "Why is he still alive?" Ruby's words echoed, taking on new meanings with each repetition. Margaret's voice whispered in my memory. "There's a difference between helping and enabling, Norman. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let people struggle. I'd enabled them, fed their dependence, made them comfortable enough to resent my generosity." The ignition turned easily, muscle memory taking over. I needed space to think, somewhere Ruby and Philip wouldn't find me. The Roadway Inn sat 8 miles away on Telegraph Road, the kind of anonymous motel where nobody asked questions. "Just need a room for tonight," I told the desk clerk, a tired-looking woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Its flight got delayed, visiting the area. Room 127 smelled like industrial cleaning solution and old carpet. 2 double beds, a small table, a single chair that had seen better decades. I sat on the bed edge, hotel notepad and pen in hand, my engineer's mind engaging for the first time in hours. They wanted independence. They wanted to learn what life looked like without my control. Perhaps it was time for a real education. The notepad filled slowly with methodical handwriting, bank accounts where I held primary access, credit cards with my name as guarantor, monthly transfers I'd automated to cover their expenses, the financial web I'd woven to support their lives without them even realizing its extent. Margaret had always said I was too generous, too quick to fix problems that weren't mine to solve. "Let Philip learn from his mistakes," she'd urged during his gambling troubles. "Otherwise, he'll never grow up." But I'd stepped in anyway, covered the debts, bought the house, enabled the very dependence they now resented. The evening news played quietly on the television, stories of other people's problems filling the silence. Outside, cars pulled into parking spaces, their occupants disappearing into identical rooms with their own troubles. Tomorrow morning, the banks would open at 9. I'd maintained accounts at 3 different institutions, spreading risk like any good engineer. Each account had specific purposes, careful organization that had served me well through 40 years of marriage and 3 years of widowhood. My phone sat on the nightstand, waiting. Banking hours were clearly posted on each website, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for most services. Phone support available 24 hours. They wanted to know what independence felt like, what life looked like without my financial safety net. Time to show them. Sleep came in fragments. By dawn, I knew exactly what needed to be done. The motel coffee tasted like burnt water, but caffeine was caffeine. I spread my financial documents across the small table, organizing them with the precision that had served me through 4 decades of engineering projects. Phone numbers, account numbers, security questions, everything laid out in logical sequence. 9 o'clock arrived with mechanical certainty. "Michigan Credit Union, this is Jennifer. How can I help you?" "Norman Kelly, account holder. I need to make some changes to my joint checking account." The first call took 12 minutes. Block Philip's debit card access. Cancel automatic transfers to their grocery and gas accounts. Remove Ruby from authorized user status. Jennifer asked no questions beyond security verification, processing each request with professional efficiency. "These changes will take effect immediately, Mr. Kelly." "Perfect, thank you." Call 2. Chase Bank. The credit card where I served as guarantor carried an $8,900 limit they'd used freely for Emma's school supplies and Jake's soccer equipment. No more. I need to remove Philip Kelly as an authorized user and block all pending charges. Sir, this will prevent him from using the card entirely. That's the intention? 20 minutes of verification questions and hold music, then, all changes are complete, Mr. Kelly. Is there anything else? That's everything. Thank you. Wells Fargo proved most complex. The savings account held their emergency fund, money I'd designated for car repairs, medical expenses, unexpected needs. Philip had online access, could transfer funds when necessary. I need to change all online banking passwords and revoke power of attorney privileges for Philip Kelly. Sir, may I ask why you're making these changes? Personal reasons. I'm the primary account holder. Of course, this will take a few minutes to process. During the hold, I watched through the motel window as other guests loaded their cars and drove away to their normal lives. Mine would never feel normal again, but perhaps that wasn't entirely bad. Mr. Kelly, all changes are complete. Philip Kelly no longer has access to any functions on this account. Excellent. 3 calls, 3 institutions, 43 years of careful financial planning redirected with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The same methodical approach I'd used to design automotive systems now applied to dismantling the support structure I'd built around my ungrateful family. My watch showed 10:47 a.m. By now, Philip would be at work, Ruby handling her design projects from the kitchen table. Normal Wednesday morning, in a house they'd soon discover, wasn't as secure as they'd imagined. The first real test would come at lunchtime when Ruby tried to buy groceries. The debit card would decline. She'd assume it was a mistake, call Philip, who would check the account balance from his office computer. 0 access, no explanation, no warning. Lesson number 1 in the curriculum of independence, understanding where money actually comes from. I folded the financial documents, slipping them back into my travel folder. The engineering project was complete, implemented with the same attention to detail I'd once applied to transmission designs and brake systems. My phone buzzed with a text message. Philip's name appeared on the screen, and my heart rate quickened with anticipation. Time to see how quickly they'd notice their new reality. The motel lunch had tasted like cardboard, but food was fuel. Now, at 2:20 p.m., I sat on the bed edge with my financial documents spread across the cheap comforter, waiting. The phone would ring soon. It buzzed at 2:22 p.m. Philip's name appeared on the screen, exactly as I'd calculated. Dad? His voice cracked like a teenager's. Something's wrong with our cards. I pressed the phone's record button with practiced precision. Wrong how, Philip? They're not working, any of them. Ruby's at the grocery store with Emma and Jake, cart full of food, and nothing's going through. The debit card, the credit card, everything's declined. Traffic rumbled past the motel window. I made a note on the hotel pad. 2:22 p.m., first panic call. That's unfortunate, I said calmly. Unfortunate? Philip's voice climbed higher. Dad, there are people waiting behind us. The kids are asking questions. Ruby's mortified. I imagined she would be. Silence stretched between us. In the background, I could hear grocery store announcements, the squeak of cartwheels, distant conversations. Dad, can you call the bank? Sometimes they listen to the primary account holder better. I already spoke with them this morning. You did? What did they say? I set my pen down carefully, aligning it with the edge of my notepad. They confirmed that all blocks were intentional and will remain in place. Blocks? Philip's breathing became rapid, shallow. What blocks? The ones I requested. Debit cards, credit cards, automatic transfers, online access. All of it. The silence lasted 15 seconds. I counted. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because you and Ruby need to learn what independence actually costs. Dad, I don't understand. We have groceries here. The kids need parents who appreciate what they have instead of plotting to escape it. Another pause, longer this time. In the background, a child's voice, probably Jake, asked, Mommy, why are we just standing here? How did you... Philip started, then stopped. You were in Florida. I came back early, yesterday afternoon. I heard your conversation with Ruby through the kitchen window. The sound that escaped Philip's throat wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a moan. pure recognition of disaster. You heard everything. Her questions about why I'm still alive. Your agreement about feeling like a teenager in your own house. Your need for a plan. Dad, that wasn't... She didn't mean... She meant exactly what she said. You both did. A woman's voice in the background, Ruby, sharp and impatient. Philip, what's taking so long? I have to go, Philip whispered. The kids are getting restless. Take them home. We'll continue this conversation when I return tomorrow. Tomorrow? But you're back? Where are you? Learning what it feels like to be truly independent, something you apparently value highly. Dad, please, we need to talk about this properly. I ended the call and set the phone beside my notepad. 2:31 p.m., first lesson delivered. Outside, a family loaded suitcases into a minivan, children running in circles while parents secured luggage. Normal people with normal problems. My phone would ring again soon. Ruby would demand explanations. But that conversation could wait until tomorrow, time for the next phase of their education. At exactly 10:01 a.m., I pulled into my own driveway for the first time in 9 days. The Honda's engine ticked in the sudden quiet as I gathered my vacation luggage and the manila folder containing yesterday's bank confirmations. The front door opened before I could reach for my keys. Philip appeared first, his face pale and drawn, followed by Ruby, whose expression promised confrontation. They'd been waiting. Norman. Ruby's voice carried false concern. We were worried when we couldn't reach you yesterday. I set my luggage down beside the door with deliberate care, then walked directly to my leather armchair in the living room. The folder went on the coffee table between us. Please sit down, both of you. They exchanged glances before settling on the couch facing me. Ruby perched on the edge like a cat ready to spring. Philip slumped back, already defeated. From my shirt pocket, I produced the small digital recorder I'd purchased at the electronics store this morning. Set it prominently on the coffee table next to the folder. You have 24 hours to leave my house. Philip's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Ruby leaned forward, eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? She demanded. I'm talking about independence, the freedom you discussed so passionately while I was supposedly in Florida. The color drained from Ruby's face. Philip's hands pressed against his temples. You weren't supposed to be back until today, Ruby whispered. I came back Tuesday afternoon, parked on the street, walked through the backyard gate, heard your entire conversation through the open kitchen window. I opened the folder, spread the bank confirmation papers across the coffee table. Each document showed blocked accounts, canceled access, revoked privileges. Why is he still alive? I quoted, watching Ruby flinch. Those were your exact words, followed by detailed plans for rebellion and escape from my so-called control. Norman, you don't understand, Philip started. I understand perfectly. You're adults who want to make your own decisions. Congratulations. Starting now, you can make them all. Ruby found her voice sharp with indignation. You were spying on us. I was returning from vacation and happened to overhear my son agreeing that he felt like a teenager in his own house. My house. The house I've provided rent-free for 18 months. I stood slowly, my arthritic knees protesting. The afternoon light streaming through the windows made everything stark, unforgiving. 24 hours, I repeated. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. I return. If you're still here, I'll bring police to escort you out. Philip shot to his feet. Dad, please, we can discuss this. There's nothing to discuss. You've made your feelings clear. Ruby stood too, her face flushed with anger and something else. Fear, maybe. The first recognition that their safety net was dissolving. This is insane, she breathed. You can't just... I can do exactly what I choose in my own home. I walked toward the front door, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. My hand closed around the doorknob. The utilities stay on for 24 hours. After that, everything gets disconnected. Philip's voice cracked behind me. What about Emma and Jake? They have school, friends. Their whole lives are here. I turned back one final time. My grandson's soccer trophies lined the mantel. My granddaughter's artwork covered the refrigerator, visible through the kitchen doorway. You should have thought about that before planning your independence. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I'd barely reached my car when the front door flew open again. Ruby's voice cut across the morning air like a blade. You've lost your mind, spying on your own family? I paused, my hand on the Honda's door handle. Through the living room window, I could see Philip pacing frantically, his hands pressed to his head. I learned the truth about what you really think of me. Ruby stormed down the front steps, her face twisted with fury. You violated our privacy. We had every right to speak freely in what we thought was our own home. Your own home? I turned to face her fully. The home I purchased, the mortgage I guaranteed, the utilities I pay. Philip appeared in the doorway, his voice desperate. Dad, we can discuss this rationally. We're family. Family doesn't plot behind closed doors about escaping each other. Ruby stepped closer, her voice rising. We weren't plotting anything. We were expressing frustration about feeling controlled and monitored constantly. And now you're free from that terrible burden. Philip stepped outside, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt. Please, can we just sit down and talk through this? There has to be some middle ground. The middle ground was providing for your family after you lost everything to gambling addiction. The middle ground was 18 months of free housing, food, utilities, and childcare support. Ruby's laugh held no warmth. Free? You think we've lived here free? We've paid with our dignity, our autonomy, our right to make decisions about our own children. Then you'll be thrilled with complete autonomy starting tomorrow. Philip moved between us, his voice cracking. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have money for deposits, first month's rent, moving expenses. You know that. Figure it out. You're adults who want to be treated as adults. Ruby's face flushed deeper red. This is about revenge, not teaching us anything. You're punishing us for having honest feelings. I opened the car door, slid behind the wheel. The engine turned over smoothly. You're right. This is about consequences for honest feelings. You wanted to know what life looks like without my support. Consider this your comprehensive education. Philip ran to the driver's side window. Dad, what about the children? Emma has her dance recital next week. Jake's birthday party is this weekend. You should have considered their needs before expressing your desire for my absence. Ruby appeared at the passenger window, pounding on the glass. We never said we wanted you dead. We said we wanted independence. I rolled down the window exactly 2 inches. 24 hours. That's more consideration than you gave me during your planning session. Philip's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. We're both sorry. We never meant for you to hear that conversation. No, you meant to have it behind my back while accepting my hospitality. Ruby tried the door handle, found it locked. You can't do this to your own family. Watch me. I shifted into reverse, backing out of the driveway while they stood on the front lawn. In the rearview mirror, Ruby was gesturing wildly, shouting words I couldn't hear through the closed windows. Philip had sunk to his knees on the grass. The house grew smaller as I drove away. But I didn't look back again. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'd return as promised. Either I'd find an empty house, or I'd bring the police to ensure it became one. Time to see if they'd learned anything about the true cost of independence. I drove back to the motel, with their shocked faces burned into my memory, my hands surprisingly steady on the wheel. The Honda handled the familiar roads automatically, while my mind replayed Philip's broken voice, Ruby's desperate anger, the way they'd both looked at me like I'd become a stranger. Room 127 felt smaller than before. I sat on the bed edge, then stood, then paced to the window overlooking the parking lot. Normal people going about normal lives, while I'd just destroyed my own family. Margaret's photo smiled at me from the nightstand where I'd placed it beside my wallet. 43 years of marriage, and she'd never seen me like this. Cold, calculating, ruthless. What would you think of me now, my love? Her voice came back clear as morning coffee. Norman, love without limits becomes weakness. Children who never face consequences never learn responsibility. But these weren't children anymore. They were adults with children of their own. Emma's dance recital, Jake's birthday party, 2 innocents caught in their parents' failure, and my justice. I pulled out hotel stationery, began writing. Dear Philip, I've reconsidered my position. The words looked weak on paper. I crumpled it up, threw it toward the wastebasket. Missed. Margaret had handled Philip's gambling crisis with steel wrapped in silk. Help him fix the problem, she'd said. Don't fix it for him. There's a difference. But I'd fixed everything for him. The house down payment, the debt consolidation, the free room and board. Every solution handed to him without struggle, without growth, without appreciation. My phone buzzed. Text message from Philip. Dad, please, we're trying to pack but don't know where to go. Can we have until Monday? Monday. 3 more days to find another solution, another bailout, another way to avoid consequences. I turned the phone face down without responding. The afternoon sun slanted through thin curtains, casting everything in amber light. In a few hours, Philip would be calling Ruby's sister in Toledo, begging for a couch to sleep on. Ruby would be scrolling through apartment listings they couldn't afford, trying to calculate deposits with money they didn't have. 24 hours to learn what independence actually costs. My chest felt tight, but not from arthritis, from something deeper. The kind of pain that comes when love and justice pull in opposite directions. Margaret's voice again. The hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to let them fall. I picked up the crumpled letter, smoothed it flat, read my own words. I've reconsidered my position, then tore it into small pieces. At 9:47 p.m. exactly, I set my alarm for 9:45 a.m. Tomorrow would bring the final test of their commitment to independence. Tomorrow I'd discover if 40 years of fatherhood had taught me anything about tough love. The pieces of torn letter scattered across the cheap carpet like snow. Some bridges once burned, stay burned. But maybe that's what growing up actually means, learning to build your own. The next morning arrived with mechanical precision. At 9:45, I dressed carefully in my best navy slacks and pressed white shirt, then drove home to finish what I'd started. Their Honda Pilot sat in my driveway, trunk open, boxes visible through the rear window. Philip appeared on the front porch carrying a laundry basket, stopped when he saw me parking. Our eyes met through the windshield, his face crumpled like a child's. I checked my watch. 10 a.m. exactly. Walking to the front door, I pulled out my cell phone, held it visibly in my right hand. Philip set down the laundry basket, stepped toward me with both palms raised. Dad, we're packing, really. We just need a few more hours. I inserted my key into the front door lock, turned it with deliberate precision. My house, my rules, my deadline. The agreement was 24 hours. That expired 60 seconds ago. Ruby emerged from the kitchen carrying Emma's backpack, her face streaked with tears and fury. This is insane! You're destroying your own family! I dialed 911, held the phone to my ear. Philip grabbed my wrist. Dad, please don't. 911, what's your emergency? I gently pulled free of Philip's grip. I need police assistance at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive, Bloomfield Hills. I have trespassers on my property who refuse to leave. Are you in immediate danger, sir? No, but I've given them legal notice to vacate and they're refusing. We'll have officers there within 15 minutes. I ended the call, slipped the phone into my shirt pocket. Philip stared at me like I'd grown horns. You actually called the police on your own son? I called them on adults who make their own decisions. This was your choice, Philip. Independence has consequences. Ruby stormed past carrying a box of children's books. You're insane. Emma and Jake will never forgive you for this. They'll understand when they're older. Will they? Philip's voice broke. Will they understand why their grandfather chose pride over family? The words hit deep, but I kept my expression neutral. They'll understand why their father chose ingratitude over responsibility. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Philip's face went white. Dad, I'll get on my knees. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. I wanted respect. Too late for that now. 2 squad cars pulled up, blue and red lights painting the morning neighborhood in emergency colors. Officers Johnson and Rodriguez stepped out, approached with professional caution. Morning, sir. You called about trespassing? I produced my driver's license and property deed from my wallet. Norman Kelly, this is my house. These people were given 24 hours to vacate. They chose not to comply. Officer Johnson examined my documents. And these people are? My son Philip, his wife Ruby, and their children. They've been living here without lease or rental agreement. Officer Rodriguez approached Philip. Sir, do you have documentation showing your right to be here? Philip's mouth opened and closed silently. Ruby pushed forward. He's our family. You can't arrest family for being in their own home. Ma'am, according to these documents, this isn't your home. Do you have a lease agreement or property deed? Silence. Officer Johnson handed back my papers. How long do they need to collect their belongings? 2 hours should be sufficient. Philip fell to his knees on the front lawn. Dad, I'm begging you, please. I walked past him into my house without looking back. Through the front window, I watched the supervised packing unfold like a carefully choreographed dance of defeat. Ruby moved with sharp, efficient anger, throwing belongings into boxes. Philip worked slower, his movements heavy with disbelief. Emma and Jake sat on the porch steps, their small faces pressed against the spindles, watching their world disappear into cardboard containers. Emma held her favorite stuffed rabbit. Jake clutched a toy fire truck. Officer Rodriguez maintained professional distance, while Officer Johnson helped Philip load the heavier furniture into their Pilot. Neighbors had gathered across the street, pretending to check mailboxes while absorbing the drama. At 12:15, Philip approached the front door, knocked softly. "Dad, can I just talk to you for a minute?" I remained in my leather armchair, staring at the television without seeing the screen. The knocking continued, more insistent. "Please, Dad, 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to explain." His voice cracked on the last word. 38 years old, reduced to begging through his childhood front door. "I know you can hear me in there. I know you're listening." The knocking stopped. Through the window, I watched Philip walk slowly back to the car where his family waited. Ruby had Emma on her lap, both of them crying. Jake pressed his face against the car window, searching for his grandfather. Officer Johnson approached Philip, said something I couldn't hear. Philip nodded, looked back at the house one final time. Their car pulled away at 12:27 p.m., followed by the police cruisers. The neighborhood returned to its usual quiet, lawns green and peaceful under the spring sun. I walked through my house slowly, room by room. Emma's bedroom looked ransacked, drawers pulled out, closet emptied. A single crayon lay forgotten under the bed, blue, her favorite color. Jake's room smelled like the apple juice he'd spilled last week, never fully cleaned from the carpet. The kitchen felt enormous without Ruby's design magazines scattered across the counter, without Philip's work papers stacked by the coffee maker. My coffee cup sat alone in the sink, the only dish that belonged there. In the living room, my leather chair sat in its familiar spot, but everything else looked different, lighter, emptier. The silence had weight to it, pressing against my ears like deep water. I settled into my chair, reached for the television remote. The evening news would start in a few hours. Weather forecast, local politics, sports scores. Normal life resuming its normal rhythm. My house, my rules, my peace. Margaret's photo smiled at me from the mantel, surrounded by family pictures I hadn't removed yet. Maybe I would tomorrow, maybe not. Outside, a car passed by slowly. Ruby's sister probably coming to check on the aftermath. The phone would ring soon. Philip's desperate voice asking for forgiveness, for another chance, for mercy. I wouldn't answer. Some lessons can only be learned in the silence between what was and what could have been. Some bridges burn completely, leaving only the truth. Family is earned through gratitude, not granted through blood. The house settled around me with contented sighs, finally mine again. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.